ExecMBA podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'd like to feature a conversation I recently recorded with Abigail Pape. Abigail is an Executive MBA format student in our class of 2020, and she is also a doctor who is based in the Portland, Oregon area. She and I recently sat down, talk a little bit more about how she decided to pursue an MBA, how she's balanced the program in her commute from Portland to the Washington, D.C. area, and how she hopes to leverage the MBA to advance her career. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Abigail Pape. Abigail, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right. So for our listeners at home, tell us a little bit more about you. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, I am Abigail Pape. I recently graduated from residency. So I'm a trained internal medicine physician, and I work at a hospital as a hospitalist in Portland, Oregon, associated with the medical center, the academic medical center there. And am obviously pursuing my executive MBA.
So obviously being a doctor, you'd already been to a lot of school before you decided to do our program. How did you think about going back to school, getting an MBA? What was that decision like?
There's two ways I approached it. One is within medical school and residency, there's very little training in, or at least education around the financing and execution of healthcare. It's very much appropriately geared towards gaining a knowledge of pathophysiology and treating diseases either medically or surgically. But the understanding of not only our system, but any system within the world and how it's financed is a virtual black box of uncertainty. And it's shifting quickly, not only within this country, but elsewhere in the world. And I wanted to be on the leading edge of how that change is not only affecting patients, but also practitioners and influencing the educational component. So going back to the driving force of what brings physicians into practice, but also how to optimize all levels of practitioners within the system. And really finding that aside from my own practice in medicine, I also have an interest in business. So I wanted to lean into that curiosity as well and marry the two going forward, either into a business administrative position within the hospital, or I'm really fascinated by the entrepreneurial elements surrounding the delivery of healthcare and considering I don't know that I will start my own, but participating in a small company and growing it, because I think the change that will be most effective are the really interesting ideas that are just gaining traction now that need a little push forward. And I want to be a part of that. So for our non-medical listeners, can you talk a little bit about what maybe an average week looks like for you, or what kind of responsibilities you have day to day? Yeah. So when I'm on service, I carry a patient load anywhere from 7 to 17 patients, and admitting and discharging them, as well as just caring for them if they're staying in the hospital. And I do that on a repetitive basis. So for 5 to 7 days in a row, sometimes in the evening or at night shift, or sometimes I'm on just an admitting shift where I admit patients, but I don't care for them myself. I hand them off to colleagues. And the purpose of the hospitalist position really is born out of the divergence from clinic-based physicians also practicing in the hospital and wanting that separation for some life balance. So it's this entity that allows physicians to be more involved in their home life and family life and not have to manage both clinic patients as well as those admitted to the hospital. So my sole responsibility is caring for patients who are sick enough that require hospitalization, and then managing their disease process and either helping them recover well or helping them transition to sort of end of life well. So you see a lot of different things, I imagine? I do. I mean, my specialty is internal medicine, which is fairly general in that sense. I do no surgeries at all, so I'm fully medically based. with some procedures scattered in there, but I do see an extensive array of disease pathology and patients of all different socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as obviously medical backgrounds and complexity. So it's an intense position, and I struggle with the balance of self-care along with caring for them well and optimizing their best health as well as I can.
So what got you interested in Darden? I should note for our listeners, when Abigail was first looking at the program, she was in Charlottesville. It's now based in Oregon. So maybe geographic proximity had a little bit to do with it. But what about Darden resonated with you? Again,
it was this two themes were very significant in looking at business schools. And the first is, what kind of an educational experience will you have going through the program? And coming from a medical background, the way in which you process extensive amount of information efficiently has to do with extensive interaction. And that's what the Darden program emphasizes, is participating with your group and with your colleagues on the on-ground site. And that's your learning team. That's the way you gain extensive insight into not only the case study and the specific learning point, but also gaining perspective from your colleagues who come with their own expertise. So exposure to that was paramount for me. Then geographically, yes, I was here for residency, which was really helpful to get to know the program well, but I also am very interested in having a broad network. And I didn't want to be pigeonholed into specifically West Coast based institutions. I wanted the exposure to both East and West Coast thinking, as I seek to be quite broad in my skill set and perspective, and wanted to leverage that by living on the West Coast and doing school on the East Coast and marrying the two somewhere in between. So I'm very happy with that decision. Already the network has proven to be so valuable in the breadth of people I've come in contact with. And I have learned extensively through the case method study. So both objectives are currently being met, which is great.
Well, we have to ask you the travel question, right? So everybody, who's listening to this or thinking about our program, some may be locally based here in the DC area, but we certainly have people that travel in and traveling from Portland. It's pretty far for these once a month weekend residencies. How have you managed it?
Oh, well, wonderfully, because of my position as a hospital-based practitioner, I can schedule my time in the hospital and outside of it to work around school. So I have specific times off that I can travel, usually on a Wednesday or Thursday beforehand, and then either Sunday or Monday after class. So it's fairly doable from that just timing and schedule element. And then it's a relatively easy direct flight. So for me, it's time that I can sit on the plane and work through any remaining readings that need to be accomplished or any other projects or deliverables. So it's really wonderful personal time to escape other demands. And I haven't had wonderfully any weather challenges. So from that element, I have been fairly lucky. But I also find I like the travel. I like coming back to DC and being a part of the city. So I think it's a benefit. I don't see it as a drawback.
Yeah, so it's probably a nice change of pace. And it's not so frequent. It's not every other weekend.
No,
right?
No, it's once a month.
And for those of you who are wondering, find that people are less familiar with where Roslyn is. The DC area is also very abstract as to where it might be. We are 5 miles from Reagan National, a little bit further away from Dulles, but it's an easy Uber or Lyft ride from here. So if you're wondering about access, multiple airports nearby. So, and one of the things that we will be changing for the class of 2021 is that Friday classes will start at noon.
Oh, nice.
So currently classes start at 10 a.m., which is not quite late enough to be able to fly in, if you want to do some sort of red-eye situation from the West Coast. But should make traveling on the first day of the residency a little bit easier. So we're excited about that. So hard to believe this, but your class is now in quarter 5. It feels like y'all just started. which is the thing I say to everybody who comes on this podcast, because I can't believe it when people are graduating. I can't believe it when people are already almost halfway through the program.
Right.
What have you learned in terms of how you balance the program and work and all that you have going on? You know, how has that process gone, and what have you learned over the past 4 quarters or so?
Well, in terms of balancing the time that's required to do well, or to at least, I think, participate well, and I add a little caveat to that the doing well is a relative component. I think there are certainly those who their objective is different than mine, and I'm interested in harnessing the fundamentals of the material and adding to that structure as I can. But I certainly don't have the background of some of my colleagues, so it's a little bit of catch up. And what I like about the program and the way that I pace my work in my life is that I do have long days at work, but when I'm not there, I get to focus fully on school and really dive into either the case for the subject matter of operations or decision analysis or economics, and research beyond that if I need some background. So I feel fortunate in that regard to not have to work during the daytime and then always study at night. I get to compartmentalize a little bit more, which I find beneficial. That's how I function well. And then overall in the course material, I've learned a phenomenal amount, both about the global economic component and how that really sets the stage for other financial discussions. So I have learned about accounting, finance, operations, and starting to apply each of those disciplines to my work as a hospitalist, even in a very minimal amount. I'm not in a leadership position at the hospital at the moment, but the goal is eventually to get there. So starting to utilize and have those conversations with the material that I'm learning I think that's the other value of this type of program, is the instant application of the topics that we discuss, and I get to apply them fairly readily.
Yeah, you don't have to wonder about how you use something to make a decision, right? You just practiced for an hour and 15, hour and 25 minutes, and it makes that all very real. Yeah, your point about the flight time. There's a lot to that. Our students who come in from New York and other places talk about just what sacred space that is. Do you have nobody, contacting you? You have time to read or just focus on whatever you're doing. And it gives you a chance to catch up maybe a little bit.
I think the other point I would add to that for anyone who's interested in, again, why East Coast versus West Coast, it's truly almost the same amount of travel time to go to Southern California as it would be to come to the East Coast. And my preference, again, was for the content and the structure. So in contemplating geographically, it's almost equidistant, even though that sounds
interesting,
not correct.
Brain is melting a little bit right now.
It's true.
So, we have a lot of doctors who, we talk to on the phone, and they're thinking, gosh, should I get an MBA? And they're thinking sometimes something much more healthcare focused. And obviously Darden is a general management program. Did you think through that? Did you think about doing something with a little bit more of a healthcare orientation? And obviously you landed on a general management program. So I'm curious about your thoughts on that. I
wanted a broad skill set. I don't think there's value to those who want the specificity of a healthcare administration specific program. But I really strongly felt I needed the background of a very general program, and I wanted to specify after that, if I needed to be able to narrow a focus if that was an interest of mine. But I think the world of healthcare is changing such that even a specification in healthcare administration may not be as beneficial as someone who has general understanding of these broad topics and their influence on not only healthcare, but other sectors, and how that can be leveraged to really be disruptive and creative and push the field in really challenging ways. And I didn't want to be pigeonholed or restricted in any capacity. So I'm finding that there's enough discussion about healthcare, even within this program, that I can either lean into that more if I wanted to, or take those specific courses and integrate them into the broad education that I'm getting.
Yeah, Q2, there was a whole class on healthcare. And to your point, it does feel like one of these industries that how it looks now versus how it looks 5 years from now. You look at all the different global concepts around, other countries, how they solve this problem and how they may be struggling with some of their solutions, or how they may be succeeding with some of their solutions. Does that have implications for the U.S.? It's just, you feel like this is an industry that's going to change. So maybe being a little bit more facile and flexible is good.
Absolutely. And I like the exposure to people of different fields. Their expertise in professional development challenges me to think about problems differently and creatively, which you might get in a specific healthcare program, but I don't know that it's as broad. And I really wanted that exposure to people who think differently than myself.
So you obviously may have some people in your life who've asked you about Darden and curious about the MBA experience. Yeah. What would be your advice to prospective students? Obviously, we talked a lot about doctors here, but just any prospective student, thinking about Darden or going back to school, pursuing an executive MBA. What would be your advice?
I think knowing what you would like to get out of the educational experience helps frame your answer as to either why or when. And two pieces of advice I found tremendously helpful when I was asking the same question of myself were, what do you hope to accomplish going forward? How will it be utilized? And if the answer to that is now as a career change or advancement, then investing the time and energy presently is of utmost importance. And the other question is, how do you want to pursue that educational experience? And doing the executive program as opposed to the traditional residential program that's offered in various other academic centers. I think being able to combine work and school at the same time was a necessary component for me to, again, apply specifically what I'm learning and to have a greater development of myself and fine-tune the trajectory as I'm going through the process, because it's iterative. I think even the advice I would give of knowing what you want to get out of the program will change as you go through the program. But you have to start somewhere, and knowing that you have a vague goal with the acceptance that it will transform over time helps answer that question of, is now the time to do that? Or do I delay it because I have other things I want to do before I reach for that specific transition?
Yeah, we were joking before we started the podcast. We get that question all the time about timing. And my impression of current students' perspectives on this particular question is, you're thinking about it now. Do it now if you can. Because it gets no easier with each passing year. Is that sort of how you would think about it too? Obviously there's a lot of individual considerations too, but there's a complexity to life that's undeniable that only increases.
Yes, I would agree with that. Life does not necessarily offer you this perfect space and time to complete obligations. So if you're thinking about it strongly enough to consider applications, I think that's a strong signal that it's a value added component to your life, regardless of whether you feel you have the time to devote to it or not. The second is that this particular program, while its demands are extensive, there is phenomenal value in going through the process of learning how to be efficient, to truly be an efficient learner. And I think that's doable any stage of life. And again, until you start and go through the process, the avenues and the contacts and the conversations that happen along the way are invaluable. And trying to predict or manipulate that in a specific way because you have a very particular idea of how it will turn out, maybe either representing the educational experience or you're misunderstanding how you want to utilize this experience in your life. So the freedom to engage in all of the components that this program has to offer is one that you have to be willing to dive into. Mm-hmm. And again, if you're thinking strongly enough that you're applying or at least pursuing in the various programs and comparing them, then it's probably time to add that to your resume.
Yeah, there's no perfect time. Everybody's, this is always going to be complex and like a little bit messy mm-hmm. and good weeks, bad weeks, and all this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it flies by. To your earlier point. So one additional question. I mean, obviously, as a doctor, you had probably done a fair amount of math mm-hmm. at some point, but mm-hmm. I'm guessing you had not had finance, mm-hmm. accounting. Maybe a basic econ class from college as a general ed requirement. This is one of these things that weighs heavily on most of our prospective students who do not have those courses in their background either. What would you say to somebody who has that particular question?
Two things. You have to be really self-motivated to understand the material. And second is leaning into your learning team or finding those classmates who have an expertise in that subject matter is the best way to start to process that information. And there's so many great resources, from the cases we're asked to read to the textbooks that give the background information, but also participating in class and talking through those elements with classmates is one of the best learning environments that I've had in my extensive education to date. So it was equally as intimidating for myself, but I also found the professors and my colleagues as equally as interested in having me succeed because they know the value of this information in what I do is paramount. So that fear was quickly laid to rest in going through the process of gaining that knowledge and experience one step at a time. It's not something that you gain overnight, but there is a process to it that is appropriate, and you have to trust and lean into that process.
Yeah, we do stress that, at Darden, you don't place out of classes just because you're the finance person or you're a CPA. You're going to be taking accounting, you're going to be taking finance. And so the expectation is that you are helping your classmates who are less familiar with these areas understand what's going on. And I think that's true in the full-time MBA. It's true in the executive MBA. You walk around here on a weekend, see people in a room, somebody explaining something on a board, and you're like, oh yeah, that's the person who's really good at decision analysis or whatever it is. So I think that's comforting to folks. So, well, Abigail, thank you so much for taking the time, and certainly hope you have a great. We're recording this. I should note there's some sacrifice being made. This is a Friday. Abigail has just wrapped up a pretty full day of class. What was your last class? Was it decision analysis?
No, it's professional advancement course, which I think is going to be a very interesting one in its juxtaposition to DA as well as operations. This idea of professionally growing as a very deliberate step, again, is unique, I think, to Darden. I didn't see it in many of the other programs that I evaluated. So it's intriguing, but very conversation heavy, very material heavy.
A lot of self-reflection.
Yes.
To your earlier point about thinking about your career goals and how they might change.
Yes.
That class is much loved, and the person who teaches that class, Connie Whitaker Dunlop, much loved as well. I think it's rare in people's lives. Quick plug for PAC, Professional Advancement Course, as it is known. It's rare in your life to have that kind of space to sort of sit and think about who you are and what you're really good at and what you'd like to do, and sort of map that out. And Connie is great about there's a process that you do this, and there's a structure to it. It's not just like free form and this whole thing. And I think it's instrumental in helping people sort of plan, what, their career goals and how they'd like to leverage all of this.
Absolutely. And no better place to ponder that than in Roslyn with views of the city and the monuments. It's really a surreal experience to ponder life with such history around you.
I know. It's, I was joking with one of your classmates who was in the Charlottesville section, Mike Dorr. He was up here last quarter for class. Still have not managed to effectively capture the view on the podcast. We'll just keep describing it to people. Right. And then maybe eventually it'll lead someone to be like, you know what? I need to see that in person. Absolutely. So we do offer class visits. And if you join us, definitely check out the views. Yes. We're on the 30th and 31st floor of an office tower here in North Virginia. I know that does not sound glamorous, but promise you can see north, south, east, and west. And that includes the National Mall.
Absolutely.
So, well, Abigail, thank you so much.
Of course.
Have a great weekend residency and safe travels back to Oregon.
Oh, thank you very much.
And that was my conversation with Abigail Pape, an Executive MBA format student in our class of 2020. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at exec, that's EXEC, MBA at darden.virginia.edu. Until next time, thanks for listening.